chapter 4. Maybe go to chapter 5.
A little bit of it?
Yeah, we just did a little bit. They were like on 1256. So she goes in the first day and she says, the king says, what is your request? What is your petition? If it's a request, unlimited bank account. The petition, which will have social and political consequences up to half the kingdom, don't destabilize things. And she confirms, I have a request and a petition. And tomorrow, I'll tell you what my request and petition are. And tomorrow, I'm going to finally do what you've been bugging me about for years already, and that is I'll reveal my origins and ethnic identification. So, 1257, verse 9, top of the page. That day, Haman went out joyful and exuberant. But when Haman noticed Mordechai in the king's gate, that he neither stood up nor stirred before him, Haman was infuriated with Mordechai. Infuriated. In other words, he hates this guy, and he's already made a plan to destroy the entire Jewish people. But unfortunately for him, it's 11 months from now. 11 months. He's got to put up with this character who's driving around the bend. And he's outraged. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. And the number of textual details here that are important. He sent for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Friends first, wife second. And Haman recounted to them the glory of his wealth and his many sons, and every instance where the king promoted him and advanced him above the officials and the royal servants. Haman said, moreover, Queen Esther invited no one but myself to accompany the king to the banquet that she had prepared. And tomorrow, too, I'm invited by her along with the king. Yet all of this means nothing to me, so long as I see that Jew, Mordechai, sitting at the king's gate. I think this is a very remarkable biographical description. The guy has everything. Then there's this Mordechai. He's not just a fly in the ointment. He's not just a little speck of dust on the Rembrandt. He spoils everything. It's worthless. Zero money and fame and power and closeness to the king and queen is worth nothing because Mordechai won't bow. I think a psychologist could do a whole study on it. But this person there's something called perfectionism, where if things aren't perfect, they're worthless. That's a disease. That's an emotional disease. A normal person says, I have 99.8%. That's great. It's a great victory. One deep explanation that I heard from a student here a long time ago. He put together what I said, I told you yesterday or the day before, that when it says the king in the Megillah, refers to the flesh and blood of Achashverosh and to God. And he says, what's bothering him? That he sees Mordechai sitting at the gate of the king. And he says, the non-Jew invests himself in what we would call material success. The Jew is attached to something that undercuts the whole of the material world. The non-Jew can't be satisfied with total material success when he's confronted by an image that the whole of the material world is superficial. There's something infinitely greater than the material world. The Jew brings home to the non-Jew the meaninglessness of his successes. That's how he could be undercut by the simple fact that Mordechai doesn't acknowledge him. Okay, that I thought was a nice, deep explanation. At any rate, that's his state of mind. And he shares this with his friends and his wife. Now, 14. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, now that's not a mistake. The text reversed the order. He called his friends and his wife. But when it comes to giving advice, she speaks first. And that she's going to pay for that, as you'll see. Said to him, let a gallows be made 50 cubits high, and tomorrow morning speak to the king and have them hang Mordechai on it. Then, in good spirits, accompany the king to the banquet. This suggestion pleased Haman, and he had the gallows erected. Now, there are two things here. I mean, why was it 50 cubits high? And who cares if it's 50 cubits high? Why does the text bother mentioning that? As we will see, the text is pretty clear that the way the gallows was situated and its height, from the banqueting hall, you can look out the window and see the gallows. So this was the suggestion. Have the gallows built, go early in the morning to the king, get Mordechai hung on the gallows, and when you go up to enjoy the banquet, you'll be able to look out the window and see your enemy hanging on the gallows. That will make your celebration perfect. You'll make your celebration complete. And Mordechai thought that was Haman thought it was a terrific idea, and had the gallows constructed. Fine. That night, sleep eluded the king, so he ordered the record book, the Chronicles, be brought before the king. Now, I said as a joke, because everyone knows history puts you to sleep. One chain of reasoning that people put, I don't know if I said this to you or not. If I said it, I don't have to, you can stop me. She invited Haman to the parties. Her goal was to stimulate a certain amount of unease, uncertainty, and perhaps jealousy in the king. Why is the queen inviting only Haman to this party? There are plots against kings' lives. Mordechai himself uncovered one of them 4 years before, and they caught the guys and killed them. Could it be, thinks the king, that Haman is plotting against me, and the queen is inclined to side with him against me, and so as to smooth the transition, she invites Haman to the party, which everybody knows. So later, when Haman takes over, people will see him as legitimate because the queen favors him. Is that what's going on here? Is there a plot against me? Then he thinks, well, maybe so, but plots do get discovered. Plots have ears. Why hasn't anybody informed me? If this is really a plot against me, why hasn't anybody informed me? And then he thinks, let's see, did anybody ever save my life and I didn't reward him? So that people feel there's no incentive to saving my life? Bring the history book. Let's go take a look. And as they're strolling through the last several years, they come across the incident where Mordechai revealed the plot to Esther, revealed it to Haman, to Achashverosh. In Mordechai's name, the text specifies there, and nothing was done for him. So at this point, the king resolves, we've got to reward Mordechai. So now the book becomes very ironical, as I said yesterday, too ironical to be believed as natural history. Just as Haman's coming in to tell the king to hang Mordechai on the gallows, the king's resolving to reward Mordechai. Yeah.
Since it seems throughout the entire chapter and even the last little bit was the speaking to the king to hang Mordecai, is that additionally was the idea that when they don't mention the name, they're also referring to Hashem?
It has to be. How to work it out in every case and explain the duality of the intentions of the text in every case, I don't know. But yes, the answer is everywhere. That's what the tradition says. Everywhere where it says just the king, without Achashverosh's name, it's a double reference. Now, watch how the king structures this. Verse 2, I guess, in the middle of the page. There was found recorded that Mordechai denounced Bigthana and Zeresh, two of the king's chamberlains and the guardians of the threshold, who had plotted to lay hands on King Achashverosh. What honor or dignity has been confirmed on Mordechai for this? Asked the king. Nothing has been done for him, replied the king's pages, because the book is blank. The king said, who was in the courtyard? I don't know why. Art Scroll often translates the word chatzer as court. Chatzer is courtyard. Who's out there? Anybody available? Now Haman had just come into the outer courtyard of the palace to speak to the king about hanging Mordechai on the gallows we prepared for him. The king's servants answered him, it's Haman standing in the courtyard. The king said, let him enter. Haman entered. The king said to him, what should be done for the man whom the king especially wants to honor? Now remember, according to the explanation I gave you, The king is now suspicious of Haman. He's suspicious of Haman. In this passage, the king plays with Haman the way a cat plays with a mouse that's already captured, but the cat's not quite ready to eat it yet. And it chases from this side of the room to that side of the room and bangs it, till it finally kills it and eats it. So he says, "Whoa, what should be done for a person the king wants to honor?" Now, what's Haman going to think? He's already prime minister. He's already the only one invited to the banquet. And by the way, Haman doesn't know why he's invited to the banquet. He doesn't know it's the queen's idea. He got an order from the king to come to the banquet. So he thinks, whom could the king be referring to when he says someone whom the king wants to honor other than yours truly? Haman reasoned to himself, whom the king especially wants to honor besides me. So Haman says to the king, I have a very elaborate plan. For the man whom the king especially wants to honor, have them bring a royal robe that the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, with a royal crown on its head, his head. So your translator writes its head, which makes it sound like the crown's going to go on the horse's head, right? That's the way it reads. And that is one way the words could be taken. Probably not what he intended, but as you'll see, when the king accepts this description, the crown is omitted from the description, and it seems that Haman went a step too far. Then let the robe and the horse, in the next verse immediately, be entrusted to one of the king's most noble officers. Let them attire the man the king especially wants to honor, parade with him on horseback throughout the city square, proclaiming before him, this is what should be done for a man upon whom the king wants to especially honor. Okay, the crown's too much, so Haman sees the king's change of expression, omits it. Then the king said to Haman, hurry then, get the robe, the horse, and do as you have said. The robe and the horse as you have said, and do all this for Mordechai the Jew who sits in the king's gate. Do not omit a single detail of that you have suggested. So here again, you can see the king knows exactly what he's doing. Haman is in shock. He definitely needs transplant surgery. And the king thinks, he's going to try to weasel out of this. He's going to try to, he won't get a horse, he'll get a donkey, or get a robe that's, I sent to the tailors for repairs. No, do everything you said exactly the way I wanted it to be done. Or you said it should be done. So, Haman took the robe of the horse and attired Mordechai, led him through the city square, proclaiming before him, this is what should be done for the man whom the king especially wants to honor. The exact opposite of what Haman had anticipated and hoped. Mordechai returned to the king's gate after this parade is over. Haman hurried home, despondent, with his head covered. Okay, they might him about that. Now watch. Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends. Which order is that?
Zeresh and then his friends.
Yeah, but in the scenario up to here, that's the second order, the order in which they spoke. Not the order in which he invited them, but the order in which they spoke. Now he's saying, here's what happened with your advice, Zeresh and my friends. Right? Watch. But now notice, by the way, he told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that happened. Now watch. The text is exquisite here. And his advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, so now she's not going to speak first because she got into trouble. But what happened to the other people?
They got turned into advisors?
Right. They're not friends anymore. Now they're advisors. What happened? He's on his way down. He's on his way down. They're not friends anymore. They've dissociated themselves with him. It's unbelievable. They call friends 3 times, and then when they speak in the same sentence, all of a sudden they become advisors. I mean, this is how carefully these texts are written. And watch what they say. If Mordechai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, the if here is rhetorical. It wasn't a question of, maybe he's adopted and maybe he's really Zulu or something. No. You will not prevail against him, but will undoubtedly fall before him. Why do they say that? How do they know that? Now, there is a Jewish tradition going all the way back to Isaac, that there are two peoples, the Jewish people and Esau. And Esau is the progenitor of Amalek, and Amalek is the progenitor of Haman, and that they will struggle. This is the prophecy she got when she was pregnant with the twins. They will struggle with one another. When one goes up, the other goes down. So they're saying to him, listen, you're a descendant of Amalek. You are contending with Mordechai the Jew. There's no way to it. One's up and one's down. And if you've now been reversed by him, you're on your way down. There's no way for you to be saved. While they were still talking to him, the king's chamberlains arrived. They hurried to bring Haman to the banquet with Esther, which Esther arranged, because maybe if he had taken their advice to heart and had time, maybe he would have run or done something else. But no, the divine providence worked it out, so they had no options. So the king and Haman came to feast with Queen Esther. King asked Esther again on the second day of the feast. Here's the king's query, again with the same vocabulary, the same order. What is your request, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. What is your petition? Even if it be up to half the kingdom, it shall be fulfilled. Request, petition, the petitions, we limit it to half. Queen Esther answered and said, if I have won your majesty's favor, if it pleases the king, same formulation she used the previous day, not, I know the rules of politics, and not, I'm very intelligent, and not, I'm very logical, and I have a proposition which I can prove to you is right. No. If it finds the king's favor, that's all. Just appealing to the king's favor. She knows her position. Let my life be granted to me as my request. Request was personal. Well, my neck is on the block. So I'm asking for that. And as a petition, my people as my petition, because saving an entire nation within the empire is a political matter. So it's divided up exactly the way Achashverosh intended, and she follows that division. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, slain, and exterminated. Had we been sold as slaves and servant girls, I would have kept quiet. For, now the Hebrew here is difficult and poetical, the adversary is not worthy of the king's damage or something like that. But her sentiment is clear. I'm only speaking because it's mortal danger. Had it been less for me and my people, not for her alone, we would have suffered it so as not to in any way injure the king's interests. She here is also acknowledging he's not someone who's going to take risks. So she says, I know that, and if we're only slavery, I wouldn't have said a word. I know what your concerns are, and I identify with your concerns, but it's life and death. This is life and death. Now, this is all ambiguous. This is all pronouns. Somebody out there has planned an attack. Achashverosh explained, said to Queen Esther, who is it? Where is the one who dared to do this? Esther said, an adversary and an enemy. This wicked Haman. Bang! I don't know who's more surprised, Haman or Achashverosh. Haman trembled in terror before the king and the queen. The king rose in a rage from the wine feast and went to the palace garden, while Haman remained to beg Queen Esther for his life, for he saw that the king's evil determination against him was final. Now, let's just try to penetrate a little bit the king's state of mind. There's a people somewhere out there in the kingdom, and they're threatened with annihilation. I wonder who that is. Maybe it's the Australian Cricketers, or maybe it's the Scottish Marching Band, or, who could that be, I wonder? He knows what's going on. Haman told him that the Jews have to be destroyed, and so on and so on. He just had no clue that the queen was a Jew. The queen, right? What's he going to do now? And anger at Haman, anger of a ruler does not require guilt. Doesn't require responsibility. Doesn't require some failure of judgment. The anger is simply, you have made trouble for me. You're a bum. Could you have done better? Were circumstances against you? Was it impossible to do better? What difference does it make? I run a kingdom to win, to succeed, and you're now causing me trouble. That's the nature of his anger. There's no point in pleading with him, but I didn't know, you didn't know the queen was Jewish. I didn't know the queen was Jewish, only a mistake, an accident. That's not going to help. When you foul up,
What does he care that she's going to be killed? Does he like her?
Who?
Achashverosh. Why is he
He's
upset?
charmed by her. She comes when he's been in isolation for 30 days and been conferring on matters of state. And the law of the kingdom is to kill anybody who comes. And he's a person who wants the law to be followed. He sees her and he just can't. He can't. Her charm is what's been testified to from the beginning when she was taken into the harem to be a candidate to become queen. She just charms him. That's all. He can't think of the Iliad, right? What triggered the Greek battle against Troy. Helen and what was his name? Paris, yeah, Helen Paris. Okay, so now Haman gets it. The king's, you can't appeal to the king, but since the queen is the one who's in danger and the queen is the one who has influence here, maybe he'll be able to beg for his life from her. What else is he going to do? So, king went out to the garden to, gather his wits. And Haman remained to beg Queen Esther for his life. What is this? This is it's rubbed out here. Oh, no, it's 8. When the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet room, Haman was prostrated on the couch by which Queen Esther was. That's astonishing. That's astonishing. Picture it. I mean, it's just astonishing, right? So the Midrash says that an angel pushed him, right? But this is not a position for him to be in. He should be on his hands and knees, on the ground, not prostrated on the bed. Okay, if you don't say that, I don't know how to explain it. It's just so absurd. So the king exclaimed, would he actually assault the queen while I'm in the house? Now, I mean, here also, this is a political gesture, right? He's not thinking maybe was trying to rape the queen. The guy's turned to jelly. He's afraid of dying in the next 20 minutes. But to say that means he's dead. To say those words means he's dead. As soon as the king uttered this, they covered Haman's face. In other words, if a person is condemned to death, so the king shouldn't have to look on the face of such a person. Put a sack over his head. Now watch this. The political realism here is just exquisite. That Charvoina, one of the chamberlains in attendance to the king, said, furthermore, the 50... Nuts. The translator misses this out. The words Charvoina utters are these. Also, behold the gallows, the tree, which Haman constructed for Mordechai, who spoke well of the king. Standing in the house of Haman, 50 cubits high. What's behold? You only say behold when something's visible. That's why I told you the text is pretty clear that you could see it from the window of the banqueting room. And that's why they originally constructed it 50 cubits high. So it's perfect because Charvona could say, look out the window and see that this criminal, Haman, he wanted to hang Mordechai. Mordechai is the one who spoke well of the king, who saved the king's life. You just honored Mordechai this morning in the public courtyard when Haman took him around and said, this is what the king wants to honor. And this, Haman wanted to hang him. But it's right there visible from the window. Couldn't be more exquisite than that. And the king said, hang him on it. Now, let me ask you a question, boys and girls. They were invited to the banquet. Harvan is one of the king's attendants, right? Do you think he looked outside the window before the king asked Esther, what is your petition? What is your request? What is your petition? And before she made her speech, and before the whole... Do you think he looked out the window? Sure, he looked out the window. Did he know what he was seeing? Well, if he didn't know then how did he know? How does he know now? Of course he knew what he was seeing. So why didn't he say it to the king before that? Because Haman was up. So far, Haman was up. Don't play around. Who knows where Haman's going to end up? Now that Haman's down, throw a stone at him on the way down. That's a Jewish expression, Throw a stone at him on the way down. That's political opportunism, I'll get a couple of points with the king if I throw another stone at Haman, as long as he's on his way down. And that's indeed what happens. They hanged him, Haman, and the king's anger abated. Now, the king's anger abated. Well, he was angry at Haman because Haman got him into the pickle. He's not out of the pickle. But this, I think, I can't explain this other than emotionally. Something has to be done. There is a problem here. But the fact that Haman got him into it, his prime minister. So, that very day, now this is a kind of prospective, that very day, in other words, these verses 1 and 2 refer to what happened later in the day as a result. 3 goes back to what's happening now. That very day, King Ahasuerus gave the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, to Queen Esther. Mordechai presented himself to the king, for Esther revealed his relationship with her, meaning that he's her first cousin and that he raised her from childhood, not revealing that they're husband or wife, according to those who say they're husband and wife. The king slipped off the signet ring which he had removed from Haman, gave it to Mordechai, and Esther put Mordechai in charge of Haman's estate. That means the destruction of Haman, the wiping him off the map, is absolutely complete. Now back to the drama. Esther yet again spoke to the king. Now watch this. This is really Hollywood. Watch this. Collapsed at his feet, cried, and begged him to avert the evil intention of Haman the Agagite and a scheme which he had plotted against the Jews. She's on the ground, crying, screaming, tearing her hair, right? The whole thing. King extended the golden scepter to Esther, and Esther arose and stood before the king. She said, watch this formulation. From crying and screaming on the floor to the following formulation. If it pleases the king, and if I have won his favor, and the proposal seems proper in the king's opinion, and I be pleasing to him, let a decree be written to countermand those dispatches devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote, ordering the destruction of the Jews, who are all in the king's provinces. For how can I bear to witness the disaster which shall before my people? How can I bear to witness the destruction of my relatives? That's not the words of a distraught woman, a woman who's at her wit's end, a woman who's, in panic. That's a carefully thought out speech. 3 times she says, pleases the king, I've won his favor. Proposal seems proper to the king, and I be pleasing. It's 2 and 2. 1 for the king and 1 for me. 1 for the king, in other words, once in the king's opinion, and second if I'm favored by the king. 2 things repeated, right? Now, here she makes a crucial mistake. That is to say, a mistake in the protocol of the kingdom, which he will pick up on immediately. And again, I don't know whether this was a planned error, that she shouldn't seem to be too smart, and that way retain her inferior status, which Ahasuerus needs, doesn't want to say that anybody knows better than he, or that she had some other intention. When she says, let dispatches be written, countermanding the order, that's against the rules of the kingdom. No order of the king can ever be countermanded, can never be reversed. And that's a very important rule. Why do you think that would be an important rule in running a kingdom? No order of the king can ever be reversed.
It shows that the king is infallible.
There's a much more practical, less prejudicial reason. That might be, but there's something much more practical, yeah?
Because communication is slow, so once you receive an order, you can act on it with confidence.
Exactly right. It's going to take weeks to get from one end of the kingdom to the other, as you'll see when the fast riders go out. So, that being the case, if an order could be countermanded and you live 3 weeks' journey from the palace, Okay, the messages came and said, everybody's got to do X. But maybe new messages are coming next week and say, no, we've changed our minds, we're going to do Y. You can't have organization in the kingdom where you can countermand an order. They didn't have SMS, instant communication. So that's a rule. Now she it's hard for me to imagine she was ignorant of the rule, but her suggestion here is impossible. So watch the way the king answers. King Ahasuerus said to the king, Queen Esther, and Mordechai the Jew, behold, I've given Haman's estate to Esther, and he has been hanged on the gallows because he plotted against the Jews. Welcome to spin. The second spin. That's certainly not true. When Haman revealed the plot in the first place, and the king gave him the signet ring, and said, do as you please to the Jews, there was no problem. That's not why Haman was hung. Haman was hung because the queen is a Jew, and now he's in a pickle. But that's the spin. When he makes these words, the king is declaring himself on record to be behind the Jews. That's going to be very important. He didn't have to say that. He says, I did it because he plotted against the Jews. You may write concerning the Jews whatever you desire in the king's name, and seal it with the royal signet, for an edict which is written by the king's name and sealed with the royal signet may not be revoked. Meaning, you can write whatever you write, but you are subject to the rule that nothing can ever be revoked, can never be taken back. So do what you like. But this you can't do because it's against the rules of the kingdom. So it's a little puzzle for you to figure out what to do. And as you will see, they figure it out fine. So the king's secretaries were summoned at that time on the 23rd day of the 3rd month. That is to say, the month of Sivan. 23rd day of the 3rd month. Wow. What happened? This is all taking place on the 15th or 16th of Nisan. This is two months and a week after that. And it was written exactly as Mordechai dictated to the Jews and the satraps, the governors, officials of the province of Hodu and Cush. 127 provinces, to each province its own script, and each people in its own language, and the Jews in their own script and language. He wrote the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's script, sent letters by couriers on horseback, riders of adult mules and bred of mares, to the effect, now watch, what to write. The original decree said that the Jews will be annihilated, exterminated, killed. Everyone should just and plunder the Jews. Everyone just kill and exterminate and annihilate the Jews. How are you going to be able to somehow neutralize that without taking it back? 11, to the effect that the king had permitted the Jews of every single city to organize and defend themselves. Okay, the original decree says everybody can murder Jews. That's still in place. That's still in place. If anybody kills a Jew, there'll be no complaint against him. There's a royal decree allowing people to kill Jews and plunder them. But the new decree says the Jews can defend themselves. To destroy, slay, and exterminate every armed force of any people or province that threaten them, along with their children and women, and to plunder their possessions. On a single day in all the provinces of the king of Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the very same day of the original edict, the Jews can now defend themselves to the extent of wiping out their enemies. So the net effect of the two decrees is war. War. Everybody against the Jews. However, the king has declared himself to be on the side of the Jews, right? He hung Haman because he raised his hand against the Jews. And the queen is Jewish, right? And the prime minister is Jewish, right? So how do you think it's going to work out on the 13th of Adar? Which way do you think the armed forces is going to go? The local governors are going to go. Which way the forces that be going to go? They're all going to be on the side of the Jews. Nobody's going to take a chance of working against that. So in the end, what happens is the Jews have a free hand to take measures against their enemies. That's how Mordechai and Esther solve the logical problem. The contents of the document were promulgated in every province, were to be promulgated in every province, published to all the peoples, Jews should be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers, riders of swift mules, went forth in urgent haste by the order of the king, and the edict was distributed in Shushan, the capital. Now, why did they wait till the 23rd of Sivan? Because they wanted to use the same couriers, the same messengers. Yes, it's a rule of the kingdom that you never take back a royal decree. Still, if one group comes and says, you have to do X, Y, Z, and they're followed by a second group that come and say, no, you have to do ABC or something that's to the opposite effect, people could think, maybe there's a revolution in the capital. Maybe it isn't the same king anymore. Who knows what's going on? It's just very confusing. So they waited for the original couriers to come back to send it out with him. Now, if you then make a little calculation, you can make a rough estimate as to how big the kingdom was and how long the communication took place. The original was on the 15th or 16th of Nisan. The second group goes out on the 23rd of Sivan. That's something like 9 weeks. 9 weeks means that if you credit them with equal time going and coming, that means it's something like 4.5 weeks to get to the end of the kingdom. 4.5 weeks, and they didn't stop for Shabbos. And these are the super fast, like Pony Express in early American history, where they rode, they got fresh horses at every stop and delivered the mail.
Extremely big.
Yeah, extremely big. It's extremely big. I mean, how many miles can a fast transportation animal cover in one day riding hard?
At least a few leagues.
I don't know how much a league is, but
It's something
100 miles. Right? If you have,
If you're constantly changing horses, and a horse can go 40 miles an hour
yeah.
at max, not for very long, but that's like the
Yeah.
absolute max.
Oh, that's max. Okay, let's say even
Let's say it's
100 miles. You got 50 days, right? You can go 5,000 miles. So the kingdom was gigantic, and that's why, as we said before, there's a policy in the kingdom of not repealing decrees, because otherwise it would be chaos. At any rate, that is the way in which they solved this problem. Now it was distributed in the capital, and Mordechai goes out in glorious clothes. The Jews are celebrating. Jews spontaneously celebrate. 9, chapter 9. So on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, when the king's command and the edict were about to be enforced, the very day that the enemies of the Jews expected to gain the upper hand over them, it was turned about. Jews gained upper hand over their adversaries. Jews organized themselves in cities throughout all the provinces of King Achashverosh to attack those who sought their hurt. No one stood in their way. Now, there is a phrase that repeats itself every time here, and that is organize themselves. The verb in Hebrew is nikahalu. Likahel means to come together in a single congregation. What did Haman say about the Jews when he wanted to convince the king to destroy them? There's a nation that's disunified and scattered throughout. Not organized, not unified, not gathered into a single congregation. That turns out to be not just, as I said then, a matter of the king's having a security that he's not attacking anybody who's strong or has a defense, but it turns out to be the key weakness in the Jewish people. The disunity made them liable to attack. And Esther understood that, and Mordechai understood that. And therefore, the antidote is to gather together to defend ourselves. That's said at least 3 times that they gathered together. And that's crucial. It's not just accidental. Now, on top of 1260, no one stood in their way, for the fear of them had fallen on all the peoples. Moreover, all the provincial officials, satraps, governors, all that conduct the king's affairs, deferred to the Jews because the fear of Mordechai had fallen upon them. He's the prime minister. For Mordechai was now preeminent in the royal palace. His fame was spreading throughout all the provinces. The name of Mordechai grew increasingly greater. Jews struck all their enemies, slaughtering and annihilating. They treated their enemies as they pleased. In Susha, the capital, they annihilated 500 men. plus the 10 sons of Haman. So, same day, the number of those killed in Shushan, the capital, reported to the king. The king said to Queen Esther, the Shushan, the capital, king, 500 men, and the 10 sons of Haman. What do you want now? Well, your quest, your petition, same formula. And now he says, without half the kingdom. He doesn't say half the kingdom anymore because he knows what she wants and he knows that it can be successful. And she says, if it pleases His Majesty, only pleasing. That's all. No other reason. Let the Jews in Shushan do today. Tomorrow is the day today. Let the Haman's 10 sons be hung in the gallows. They hung them. Another 300. Rest of the Jews throughout the king's province organized, defended themselves from their foes, something about 75,000. Now, you're talking about a kingdom of 127 provinces. What might the population be? Millions of people. You're talking about millions of people. 75,000 sounds like a big number. But when you're talking about millions of people, the percentage is very small. And I do this in the text, but I haven't had time to do it here. But it talks about enemies and those who hate them. And one refers to those who actually are actively pursuing Jews. And the others are the ones who hate them, but don't put it into action. They only went after the ones who are actively taking actions against them, seeking to injure the Jews. Now, there's one last thing that I want to tell you. Everywhere else, they didn't have 2 days. They had 1 day on the 13th. Now, look at verse 16. The rest of the Jews throughout the king's provinces organized, defended themselves, relief from their foes, slaying 75,000 of their enemies. But they did not land in spoils, by the way. They didn't touch any money. All the way through, no money. Although they had permission, but that wasn't the point. The point was defense, not enrichment. That was the 13th day of Adar. And they gained relief on the 14th day and made a day of fasting and gladness. The Meshech Chochmah says a very important principle here. You have a historical event. You have an opportunity to free yourself from those who are trying to hurt you, trying to injure you. There's a battle and you win the battle. A year later, what day do you celebrate? Ask any nation that has a successful battle, you celebrate the day in which you won the battle. Not the Jews. No, they celebrate the day after the battle. They're not celebrating the downfall of the enemies. They're celebrating the fact that they are at peace and are not in danger. That it's always said that several times in this chapter. The day in which they had relief, not the day in which their enemies were destroyed. And the Meshech Chochmah traces this back to this passage in the book of Deuteronomy. The Jews are in Egypt. The 10 plagues take place. And just before they leave, God tells them, when you leave, when you come to the land of Israel, there's going to be a holiday called Passover, and so forth and so on. And that holiday is 7 days long. The first day is a formal holiday, and the last day, the seventh day, is a formal holiday. And in between, you have minor celebrations. Now, that's what's told to them in Egypt. They leave on the first day, 15th of Nisan. They travel. On the 7th day, they come to the Red Sea. That's the day in which the sea splits. They go across, and the Egyptians are drowned. So the 7th day of Pesach is the anniversary of the drowning of the Egyptians at the Red Sea. So the Meshech Chochmah says, it's crucial to note that the 7th day became a holiday while still in Egypt, before the Egyptians were drowned, so as to make it clear that it's not instituted as an anniversary of the drowning of the Egyptians. Because again, we're not celebrating the destruction of our enemies. Meshech Chochmah says this in the passage over there in Deuteronomy. We celebrate our salvation, we don't celebrate the destruction of our enemies.